At the end of last year, I was feeling a little bit stressed, and so I decided I needed to pick up a new hobby that I could do after coming home from work to help de-stress myself. And so I went through kind of a list, trying to find something because I don't want something that requires me to think, because that would defeat the whole purpose of me trying to de-stress after work. So I was looking at some hobbies, and eventually I think I Googled something and saw that, what are good hobbies that you don't have to think about type thing. And evidently, the ukulele is one of the easiest instruments to learn. So I started playing the ukulele. And as always, if you're doing a new skill, I'm a modern person, and modern people, when they need to learn a new skill, immediately go to YouTube. So I immediately went to YouTube to learn the skill. And one of the things that these YouTube people would say was, as you're starting out, brand new, I don't know anything, right? I don't even know how to hold it. And they say, here's some things that you should do. Now, there's some things that will, in the moment, especially early on, feel easier for you to do. Don't do those things. And they say you won't understand why, but eventually you'll reach a point where you're learning a new skill, and if you have built up those bad habits, you're going to have to unlearn everything and learn it the right way, or else you won't be able to progress, right? This idea of penny wise, pound foolish, or since we're not Brits here, we might say dime wise, dollar foolish. Because it seems in the moment, at the beginning, this is really wise for me to do. This is easier. The way that they're trying to describe it is super complex. It's going to take a lot of repetition for me to get. It's much easier. It feels more natural for me to do this thing. In the moment, it seems wise. But then a point in time will come when what seemed wise in the moment actually shows itself to be, that was really foolish. Because now, instead of learning something brand new for the first time, you actually have to unlearn all these things and then relearn what you should have learned to begin with. Here in the psalm that we're reading today, we get this sense of, how do you live life wisely? How do you live life wisely? And we started out the psalm that we've sung and we'll read here in a moment with kind of that warning that those YouTube ukulele channels were telling me of. Well, to start with, don't do this. This may seem wise in the moment, but actually, long term, this is a foolish way to live. Let's read that in Psalm 14, beginning in verse 1. The fool says in his heart, there is no God. They are corrupt. They do abominable deeds. There is none who does good. The Lord looks down from heaven on the children of man to see if there are any who understand, who seek after God. They have all turned aside. Together they have become corrupt. There is none who does good, not even one. Have they no knowledge, all the evildoers who eat up my people as they eat bread and do not call upon the Lord? There they are in great terror, for God is with the generation of the righteous. You would shame the plans of the poor, but the Lord is his refuge. Oh, that salvation for Israel would come out of Zion. When the people restores the fortunes of his people, let Jacob rejoice, let Israel be glad. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
The fool says in his heart, there is no God. Now I want to warn us before we get too far in advance that some of us might be taking a shortcut. And some of us, as we're reading that first verse, the fool says in their heart, there is no God, you're interpreting that in your mind of, the atheist is stupid. Right? But let me tell you, there's a reason I'm starting there, because if that's how we're shorthand understanding what is going on, then we're going to miss what the psalmist is actually trying to say. So first of all, remember this was written almost 4,000 years ago. There were no atheists 4,000 years ago, right? Everyone worships some sort of God of one kind or another. Even if that God was a tree or a stone, they worship some God of some kind or the other. Atheism is a pretty modern invention. So we already know straight off, this isn't talking about atheism. The other reason I'm kind of saying that is because it is very easy for us. The fool says in his heart, there is no God. Well, I worship God. I show up on Sunday. By definition, I can't be a fool. Okay? And especially if we're kind of associating this with atheism. Well, I'm not an atheist. By definition, I'm not a fool. But that atheist over there, they're such a fool. They're so stupid. I've had experiences where I've been teaching a class, and afterwards I'll have a student come up and say something along the lines of, I just can't understand how someone could have ever done that. Like, they seem so stupid. Like, how could they have ever done this? And on the one hand, I'm glad that is so foreign to their way of mindset that they can't understand why that person is doing it. I'm glad that they have such confidence in Scripture that they just can't imagine like how anyone could read it and not see the truth of it. Like, in that sense, I'm very glad, but it also kind of makes me a little bit sad because left unchecked, that can turn into a sense of pride. Look at me, the wise person, not like those fools that I'm surrounded by. How foolish this culture is, and I'm the only wise person around. If they would just listen to me, right? If America just put me in charge for 24 hours, I would solve all their problems. And I hear that every time I have dinner with my family, right? You solve all the problems of the country in one dinner. But if that's kind of how we're approaching the first verse, we're completely missing the psalmist's point. Because immediately, what does he say? The fool says in their heart, there is no God. They're corrupt. They do abominable deeds. There is none who does good. The Lord looks down from heaven on the children of man to see if there are any who understand, who seek after God. They have all turned aside. Together, they have become corrupt. There is none who does good, not even one. So when the psalmist starts by saying the fool says in his heart there is no God, he's not pointing to someone else. He's not saying my neighbor, such an idiot. My boss, what in the world was he thinking? My parents, I can't believe they lived long enough to have me because they're so foolish and I know better than them. No, the psalmist is starting to say, the fool says in their heart there is no God, and I am that fool. Paul in Romans 3 directly quotes this psalm. If you remember Romans 1, right? The corruption of mankind turning away from God. And then he's saying, is it just the Gentiles? Can we as the Jews stand and say, we alone worship God and you guys have failed? And then when he gets to chapter 3, he says, no. Whether it's Jew or Gentile, all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. And Psalm 14 is his biblical passage, his biblical evidence to support that point. We are the fools. Well, how are we the fools? Because, again, all of you here in this church, you acknowledge that there is a God. You have friends who, even if they're not Christians, they acknowledge some sort of God. So what is the psalmist getting at when he says, the fool says in their heart, there is no God? I already mentioned in the ancient years, 4,000 years ago, there were no atheists. Everyone would say, if you found a random person and said, do you believe in a God? They would say, of course. In fact, not only do I believe in a God, I believe in multiple ones, right? I'm a super theist. I believe in all sorts of gods. So what's the psalmist's point? The fool says in their heart, there is no God. In their lips out loud, they would acknowledge this presence of all these gods, but in their heart, how do they act? How do they think? I could probably, without even trying to think, at least off the top of my head, within the past 2 days, think of at least 5+ times where even though my lips acknowledge that I believe in God, my heart, my actions, I'm acting like there is no judge. I'm acting like there is no greater ruler than me. That there is no one I have to give an account for but me. And that is what the psalmist is saying is the root of foolishness. It may seem in the moment to be wise when you are doing these things, when you are deciding for yourself how I should live, when you are taking actions because you desire it. That in the moment may seem to be wise, but it's a dime wise, but a dollar foolish. Acting as if there is no God who rules over me, no God from whom I need to give an account. And from that, from the heart, springs forth the actions in verses 3 and verses 4. Or even in verse 1, they're corrupt, they do abominable deeds. They've turned aside, they become corrupt. There's none who does good. They have no knowledge. That's 3 and 4. They have no knowledge. All evildoers, they eat up my people as they eat bread. And of course, from our perspective, we can see how all that's bad. But again, put yourself in these shoes. I'm taking bread from others. That seems wise in the moment because I'm gaining stuff, right? I'm prospering. Yes, my prospering is at the expense of someone else, but in the moment, I'm helping out myself. It seems like that should be the right avenue for me to live. All of these actions springing from the heart. There's one thing that as you kind of learn about the Anglican worship service, it's how much this idea of the heart comes up over and over and over again throughout the whole worship service. In our opening prayer, incline the thoughts of our heart. Just like in verse 1, the thoughts of the heart of the fools, what there is no God. And at the beginning of the worship service, we express our need, our dependence on God to incline our hearts, the thoughts of our hearts, away from being the fool that is, as we saw in our question and answer, the natural state of fallen humanity. And by the inspiration of your Holy Spirit, right? To change our hearts away from our default, we are fools, to ones who are wise, acknowledging the God who reigns over us, and because of that, moving it out into our actions. And then we get into the 10 Commandments, right? And again, you would think, 10 Commandments, you would think the response would be, Lord, keep us from doing these things. Like that seems like that's the proper response to, you have 10 Commandments? God, let me fulfill these 10 Commandments. And it kind of is, but what is the response? It's about the heart, right? Incline our hearts to keep your law. And the reason why this heart comes over and over and over again in the Anglican service of worship is because of this reason that the psalmist is mentioning, how just like the fool says in their heart, and it starts there is no God. And because that is the thoughts of their hearts, it expresses itself in corruption and abominable deeds, in no good actions, in devouring the people for their own satisfaction, for their own bread. An Anglican worship service knows if you want to solve all those actions, you don't play whack-a-mole with all these deeds and try to fix one bad habit, fix one bad habit, fix one action. But instead you have to go to the root of the heart. The fool says in their heart, there is no God. And it is only by fixing the heart that one moves from being a fool to being wise. Being the fool seems in the moment to be the wise action. Find yourself is one of the things we tell our children in this culture as like the chief thing. How do you move from being a child to an adult? Find yourself, right? Follow your heart, as basically every Disney movie ever made tells us, right? And in one sense, I think Disney's picking up on something that's really wise. Follow your heart is a recognition, just like Psalm 14:1 says, of your actions are going to conform to what is in your heart. In the Disney movie version of it, there is no God. Their heart is the chief good. And so, it's a Disney movie, so it's nothing terrible is going to happen, but in real life, what seems in the hour, 90 minutes of the movie is like, this is an awesome way to live. This is a wise way to live. In the years and years and years outside that 90 minutes will prove itself to be foolish. Verse 5, we see what happens when the fool follows his heart. Even when things seem to be going their way, they seem to be prospering, and yet in verse 5, they are in great terror, for God is with the generation of the righteous. You would shame the plans of the poor, but the Lord is his refuge. Oh, that salvation for Israel would come out of Zion. When the Lord restores the fortunes of his people, let Jacob rejoice. Let Israel be glad. In the moment, it seemed like they were following a wise path, one that caused them to prosper. But then they come to the realization that God is not with them. Even though it seems like it, right? God must be with them because they're being blessed. Their business is expanding. They're growing. It seems like their path is the wise path. But God is not with them. God is with the generation of the righteous. This self-centeredness that they're living their lives where they are the chief judge and jury of their own life. There is no God that has any kind of rule in their life. They can chase their own happiness without any second thoughts until they hit the wall. Just like when if I picked up the ukulele and I did what seemed natural and right, it would work for a while. It seemed, I'd go like, man, they're telling me I need to practice all this time and like try to get my hand to do things that feel very uncomfortable. Like, that's stupid. When I can do the same thing in this natural way and be just as good. And it works. Until I hit that wall. And I realized, oh, past me was an idiot. And here, it seems when the fool has fallen in his heart that he's not a fool, but he's wise until he hits the wall and he realizes God is with the generation of the righteous, not with me. There is a judgment. That's what we said, confessed right before I came up here. The Lord is returning. Jesus is returning, and he will be the judge of the living and the dead. It all seemed good until the day of reckoning comes, when you have to face the consequences of your actions. But notice we live in a little bit of a tension here. Because even though in verse 5 and 6, it's clearly established that God is with the generation of the righteous, that the Lord is the refuge of the poor, and yet we look around and we say, well, that's not what I see. It doesn't seem to be true. Where is this God that you're speaking of who's on the side of the righteous? Because it sure doesn't seem like that. It sure seems like the unrighteous are prospering. And when they die, they have these giant funerals that might even be on TV. And important people come and speak at their funerals. Like, it sure seemed like living it their way, doing it their way, sure worked out for them. And the psalmist recognizes this tension because he ends in verse 7 not with this like great boom. That was me going like blowing up the foolish person, like boom, foolish person, you just got mic dropped. But instead he ends with this prayer. Oh, that the salvation of Israel would come out of Zion. Elsewhere, the psalmist say something more along the lines of, how long, O Lord? How long will you let these foolish people succeed? How long will us who are trying to live wise lives under the authority of you and your word suffer? How long? And he looks around and he realizes, I can't fix this from my own wisdom. As much as it pains me to admit it, if I was president for 24 hours, as much as I can solve all their problems over the dinner table, I won't be able to solve their problems. When I vote every election, even when the person I vote for wins, that doesn't solve all the problems. When I get a raise or a promotion at work, and I think finally, all these things that I've been complaining about for years, I can now fix. And they don't get fixed. Because the psalmist recognizes at the end of the day, what is broken in this world cannot be fixed by me. And in fact, I would go even farther and say, if we think that what is broken in the world can be fixed by us, we are the fool in verse 1 who is saying that there is no God. But instead, in verse 7, the psalmist actually demonstrates what true wisdom looks like. If the fool says there is no God, the wise person in verse 7 says, God, only you can fix this. I depend on you. I need you. And so he says, God, fix this. May you bring salvation out of Zion. And of course we know, because we know our Bibles really well, who the salvation that comes out of Zion is. Jesus Christ. And yet, remember, from the time the psalmist is saying, Lord, bring your salvation out of Zion, to the incarnation where the salvation from Zion comes, is still almost 2,000 years. And it helps us think, how many people prayed this prayer day after day after day and wondered, are the fools right? Are they right when they say there is no God and therefore I should do everything myself? I should live in the way that pleases me? Are they right? Because it's been 2,000 years and I'm still waiting for God to act. I'm still waiting for God to make everything right. I'm still waiting for my hurt to be healed. And I think there's many of us here today who could say those things as well, right? Even though theologically we know salvation has come out of Zion, and yet we still cry out, Lord, where is your salvation? Why am I still hurting? Why am I still in pain? Why does it seem like those fools are actually living the best lives? When the Lord restores the fortunes of his people, let Jacob rejoice. Let Israel be glad. We're living in this weird time when through the cross and through the resurrection, God has clearly demonstrated the foolishness of the world. He's clearly demonstrated, as Paul says, the wisdom of God in the cross. And yet still we are praying, verse 7. Still we are saying, Lord, that your salvation would come. Lord, that you would make everything right. Lord, we are waiting for that rejoicing. We are waiting for the resurrection. It may feel foolish for us to live like that, right? I think we've heard various phrases over the years of people talking about you're just pie in the sky, right? You're chasing something imaginary that will never happen. You got to be realistic. You got to live in the world we live in. Stop being an idealist. Stop putting all your hopes on some imaginary thing. Be realistic. And you can sense how that feels like it's wise in the moment. It feels wise to say, no one is helping me out now except for me. If I don't fix it, it's not going to be fixed. It feels wise in the moment. But in eternity, it's foolish. The wise person says in their heart, there is a God who rules and reigns. There is salvation which has come from Zion. there is a second coming that will come and make everything right. And I depend upon God to do that. But until that moment, we can rejoice, knowing that what God has promised, he will fulfill. Salvation has come and will come, and we can rejoice. Not because we got a raise in our jobs, not because we got a nice house or our kids or a new car or any of the other reasons why the world tells us we need to rejoice for. But we can rejoice because salvation is coming out of Zion. Jesus has come. He has defeated death. He has made a mockery of Satan. And we can rejoice. When the Lord restores the fortune of his people, let Jacob rejoice. Let Israel be glad.